I hope everybody's doing okay today. At least we don't have any thunderstorms going on right now, so hopefully we can manage to have class without thunder in the background. I do have the record button on, and I have taken the 2 recordings that I did on Tuesday and put them in Blackboard. Those were the ones that had a lot of details about your presentations that you'll be doing for me. So if you need to go back and look at those, one of them is in week 8 and one of them is in this week's week 9, and then I will also put this one in there. Because today we're going to finish up talking about the appropriate ways to deliver your presentations. But I want to just remind you all that what you'll need to do, you can present Tuesday or Thursday, but you need to have placed into Blackboard where the assignment is 2 things. You need to place the actual business proposal, and then second of all, you need to place the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to share the screen and go back and show you where that is to make sure you're okay with that, because they need to be placed in there before you actually do your presentation. So I'm going back into Blackboard. I think the presentation was, I can't remember if it was actually week 8 or week 7. Let me see where I put it. I think it might have been in week 7. Oh no, it was in week 8, I remember, because that was the week I couldn't broadcast in the second half of the week. So under week 8 materials was where you actually found your business proposal assignment. When you are ready, after you've done all the things that are here, when you're ready to submit that, just click on the business proposal assignment and go down to where it says assignment submission. You'll browse your computer and attach 2 files. So you have to browse your computer twice to pick up both files. One, again, is the report. That was the one that's like page, I think it was, what, 407, 408 that we looked at?
Yes.
Okay. That's one file. That's your Word document. And then the second file you'll browse for will be your PowerPoint presentation. So make sure you do those before you actually present. And then, of course, once you browse and get those 2 files attached, just click Submit down here at the bottom. So they will be there for me. And then they'll be available for me to put grades on as well. And speaking of grades, I've started grading the portfolio of messages, the 3 messages that you had to write for me. I've gotten through the first one and I've started on the second one. So you can be looking at your grades in those assignments as well, and be sure to read any comments that you see there. Okay, so I'm assuming that most people are probably going to be presenting on Thursday of next week, but Tuesday is perfectly okay. I do have some online students that are coming in on Tuesday to present as well, so just let me know if you want to go Tuesday, just please let me know. All right, so we are back down into week 9, the second half of week 9, and this is a chapter on presentations. Again, on Tuesday we looked at how to plan those presentations. Now we're going to look at delivering them. I know a lot of people are a little bit concerned when they say they find out they have to do a presentation, so we're going to address some of the issues that are, might cause you a little stress and anxiety today as well, but give you some good tips. Now remember, when you're doing your presentation for your business proposal, this is not anything really long, about 10 minutes is a max there. And you'll be presenting to me, but you're going to be kind of like pretending that I'm Ms. Blair. And you can pretend that there are other people in the room as well. And also remember that while you'll find out today that the dress that you wear is certainly important, I am not requiring you to dress up for this presentation. So let me get to today's intro video by the author, and we'll listen to what Dr. Carden has to say, and then we will get into today's PowerPoints.
Hi, I'm Pete Carden, the author of your textbook. Today we'll talk about why delivering presentations well matters, and I'll also issue a challenge. One reason presentations are such a great opportunity for you is that you can connect deeply with your audiences and convey and control your messages correctly. Once you've prepared the content of your presentation, it's time to deliver. This is an exciting moment, yet it can also be nerve-wracking for most presenters. Embrace this time. The more you focus on the needs of your audience, the better you'll be, and the easier it will be for you psychologically. We focus on two broad areas in this chapter. First, establishing presence. Second, interacting with your audience. Many people talk about great presenters as having presence. Some people refer to this as the it factor. It's often discussed in somewhat mysterious terms. In this chapter, we'll demystify that process. And we'll focus on 6 or 7 specific strategies to help you develop presence. These strategies include establishing credibility, being authentic, and focusing on the people in the audience. You'll find examples of each. The second major area in the chapter is interacting with your audience. Presentations do not begin or end with you standing up in front of a group. Rather, they start as you interact with people before and after the event begins with the present. We'll talk about how to mingle and follow up. We'll also talk about fielding questions during the presentation. My challenge for you with this chapter is to find your voice. You undoubtedly have the abilities to be a great presenter. Put yourself in situations where you have to speak in front of a group. Try out various approaches and learn how the audience responds to you. Find out your best voice. There's no one way of establishing presence. It's unique for each person. But it does take some searching. Good luck working on your presentations.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you kind of take the position that has been presented by your author as you look at this as an opportunity to learn how to present without fear, the ability to provide your audiences with what they need in order to help them make their decisions. And lots of little good hints about the way that you stand, the way that you focus on certain people, how to overcome some of those fears that you may have. One of the greatest things somebody ever taught me was that when you're doing a presentation, if you have done your preparatory work, your research, and prepared for it, you know more about the subject than anybody that you're presenting knows about it. So you can go in with confidence and feel good about yourself because you've done the research, and all you're doing is you are helping to share that information with whomever your audience is. So if you approach it that way, I found that it makes it so much easier to be confident in what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to, we're going to take a look at the PowerPoints, and You know, I always have to fool around with this to get the PowerPoints up, so let's make sure we got that going. Okay, do we have PowerPoints over there?
No.
No, of course not. Okay. Even though I checked it before I.
Are we chapter 15 PowerPoint?
Yeah, hold on. See, it flips back from extend to duplicate on me every time. So hopefully we got it going here. All right. Let me share screen again. And all right, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So again, we're on chapter 15, continuing our look at the actual presentation, not the development. By this time, you've already developed your proposal and you're ready to actually deliver that to your audience. So we planned it in chapter 14, and now we're going to talk about how we can effectively deliver that presentation. Of course, we've already talked about how your presentations can impact your credibility. We'll review that. We'll talk about how you can be confident and influential in your presentation. We'll use something called the soften model of nonverbal communication. Not everything gets communicated through word of mouth. We have a lot of nonverbal things going on when you're doing a presentation as well. We'll talk about using slides and handouts, and of course I am expecting you to use some type of slide presentation in your presentation. How to interact with your audience. You are not actually doing a team presentation, but frequently you may be asked to do this either in school or in your work life. So we'll visit a couple of pieces of information about team presentation as well. Also, there's a little bit of information about what about when you're part of the audience, not part of the presentation team. We'll talk about being a supportive audience member. So what Dr. Carden talked about in that little intro video started off with saying that you need to establish a presence, the it factor, as he called it in his video, when you begin your presentation. That will establish your credibility. It shows that you are authentic in what you're delivering. We'll talk about knowing your material and rehearsing that material, overcoming that anxiety, and then learning to focus on people. So to establish your presence, we're also going to learn how to be flexible, because it's not like you're going to memorize what you're going to say and stand up and just spout that off. Neither are you going to just read directly from your slides. Whenever you're addressing an audience, the audience has the opportunity to interact with you, so you need to be able to stay flexible. We'll talk about using the room to your advantage, some nonverbal tools, and dressing for success. Okay, we of course are doing an example of an internal presentation within our own company. When you are doing your presentation about to Mrs. Blair about that web page you think the company ought to have. So that gives an opportunity for others to change their view of you. Okay, it gives you a chance to shine. Show them what you got, what you're made of, okay? You want to be able to use your presentations as a way to increase your credibility. And of course, that puts a good light on you and may open up all kinds of doors. Now, if you are doing a presentation outside of your own company, if you're doing an external presentation, then that type of presentation, you will have an opportunity to improve your credibility for people who have probably never even met you before, okay? Or if they have some kind of superficial impression of you. So you get to show off your confidence by letting them see how well you know the content of your presentation. You want your real self to come out. You don't want to have a fake persona showing when you are doing your presentation. Allow your real true self to come out. You need to run through your presentation several times before you actually do the presentation. You become more confident, more comfortable. If you have any areas that don't seem real strong, you can work those out ahead of time. You can figure out what parts of your presentation you want to emphasize through tone and nonverbal communication. I mean, I really don't think of my lecturing in the class as presentations, but in a sense they are. And most of you that have been around me know that I like to kind of come to class a little bit early and run through my material one more time before we go through it, just to work out any kinks in it, maybe find some things that I want to add on to the lecture by looking through YouTube and so on. There's such a wealth of information out there that you guys are just in contact with stuff to make your presentation so much more real and become comfortable with it before you actually present. Now, this little results of a survey here show that public speaking is the second greatest fear of American adults, right behind snakes. Snakes are my top one, for sure. So some of these things I look at and I go, yep, they're for me too. I'm not too awfully bad about spiders and insects or needles and getting shots, because I have to give myself shots every day, so that's not that big of a deal for me anymore. But I have a cousin who passes out every time she sees a needle coming at her. I mean, literally passes out. And Lord forbid if she gets a scratch or a boo-boo that bleeds, one little drop of blood and she's out of it. So, you know, I'm thankful that I have overcome, if I ever had a fear. I'm going to tell you why I think I don't have a fear of shots to begin with was I grew up on a reward basis. We always went and had flu shots every year when I was growing up. It was when you had to actually go to a doctor's office to get them. You weren't able to run to your pharmacy and get a flu shot. Well, my dad and my mom and I would all load in the car to go get our flu shots on the same day. And I guess in a way to sort of bribe me, my daddy said, okay, I'm hiding $1 bill in the car, and the first one that gets their shot and gets back out here gets that $1 bill. Well, you have to realize back in my day, a $1 bill was worth a little bit more than it is now. But I would volunteer to be first so I could get back. It was also during the days when you didn't have to lock your car doors when you left too. But I would get back to that car and get that $1 bill. I don't care if my arm hurt or not. I wanted that $1 so I could go shopping and probably buy my Barbie doll something new to wear. But that was, you know, I think I kind of like associated shots with something rewarding in the end, so I never really got real uptight about them. So not that that's going to work with everybody. Obviously, it didn't work with my cousin. I think some of the things on here are, I would move next to the last one, going to the doctor. up the list for me. I don't like to go to the doctor, and it's not the needles and the shots. I'm one of those people that fears that there's going to be bad news or whatever with it. Not really afraid of the dark or dogs or crowds or mice, but you can see these are all things that I have in certain situations. I don't like heights, and I'm a tiny bit claustrophobic, but thunder and lightning, I don't really like them. We you know, when I left here Tuesday, I went to Lowe's and I got stuck before the bottom just dropped out with that last storm that we had right here during the class. It was like a repeat of that, but there were streaks of lightning, just horrible. I mean, we were all standing at the door trying to go, but you couldn't go to your car because it was so much rain coming down. But that lightning was horrible, and I know it struck a few things, so I was not real pleased with that. That did kind of scare me. But we were sitting there talking about how some people like to sit out on the front porch during a thunderstorm and watch it and listen to it and all that sort of stuff. I'd just soon be inside the house. Now, if it's just a rainstorm, that's cool. I love to smell fresh rain and sit out there and, you know, just watch it. But when there's lightning involved, I'd rather go on inside the house. So, you know, thunder and lightning, maybe that's about the right ranking, maybe a little bit higher for me. But clearly the point of this slide is that public speaking appears not to be something we all look forward to. So I have, you know, I can remember taking a public speaking class my freshman year in college, dreading that first time I had to stand up and give that presentation. And I kind of had to psych myself into it, but you know, there's all kinds of little tools, like if you imagine your audience is naked or something like that, you know, I'm sure you've heard some of those. So I could, believe you me, I don't stand up here in every class with you all and imagine y'all naked, okay? And I hope that you'll find some other tactic to use other than that. Now, the thing is, you have to realize that being nervous over giving a public presentation actually can work out to be good for you, because it kind of gets you on the edge to deliver. It's your body acting the way it should, and it can help you show your emotion, your passion. It's only when it gets to the point where it impairs your ability to convey your message that it becomes a problem. So that's when you need to perhaps take some techniques that they've got listed here, like relaxation techniques and breathing techniques, and practice visualizing things. Pick somebody out in the audience who is a friendly face to help gain your composure in the beginning. Watch your food and beverage intake. What in the world do you think they're talking about there?
There's nothing more uncomfortable than when you're uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, if you have like had a big meal right before your presentation and your belly starts hurting, and if you're uncomfortable, that's going to come across to the audience. If you're hyped up on caffeine, that might, you know, or if you have had too much to drink that you have to go run to the restroom during your presentation, that could be kind of embarrassing. So basic things like that we might not think of until we've had a mistake with it somewhere along the line. Remember that Dr. Carden said that your presentation doesn't start and end when you enter a room and when you leave a room. You need to take time in the beginning to mingle a little bit, feel comfortable with your audience members before you actually start your presentation. And then after that actual formal presentation, you'll have a chance to talk one-on-one with people, even continue on with selling your idea if you're trying to persuade people of something. So don't leave out those parts of your presentation as well. Make other people the subject of your sentences. Introduce colleagues and refer to them by name. If you know the names of your audience members, use those as appropriate. I remember a pastor I have, one of the first pastors who ever actually called out congregation names during his sermon. I thought that was unusual, but perhaps he was just practicing one of these techniques. So did not really actually require them to respond to anything, but would just say, isn't that right, Bob, or whatever, during his sermon. So I thought that was a little unusual, but maybe they had taken this class. I don't know. Okay, so let's look at a little bit of the differences there about making people the subject of your sentences. The first one says the survey showed just 43% of respondents believe that annual reviews are accurate indicators of performance. Okay, that might very well be a good statement, but it's kind of impersonal, so they have reworded that to make it a little better. Jeff, Steve, and I developed the survey after holding focus groups with our employees to learn about their views of annual reviews. Of the 223 employees who took the survey, just 43% believe that annual reviews are accurate indicators of performance. So it shows you the people that were involved. It's making it more of a personal, engaging type comment. So for some reason, the audience will respond and listen harder when you start using other people's names. Notice this one, less effective. I'll be presenting research conducted by the HR team versus the second one, our HR team, including Jeff Brody and Steve Choi, and so on there. You're actually using people's names in your presentation to make it a little more relevant to the people, a little more compelling. Use names of audience members as well as members of people on your team and so on. Before we started the meeting this morning, Cynthia, John, and I were chatting about annual performance reviews. That's much more compelling, personable than the first one where you just lump everybody together as managers or employees. Okay. Some recommendations for being flexible with your presentations. Always recommend you arrive early, okay? It may be that you're called upon a little early for your presentation, or you may be able to just use the time to get yourself together and review things in your head and so on. Focus on what it is your audience needs. Remember again, when we're dealing with business proposals and business reports, we are trying to help our audience make a decision over some type of business problem. If you learn to focus on other people rather than on yourself, you'll find it much easier to keep to your actual presentation. But if you do lose your place, don't panic, okay? And don't admit you're wrong in front of the audience. Don't say, well, things didn't go as well as I thought they were going to. Always have a plan B, okay? Let me tell you, I've had many a time when I came to class ready to do a presentation through the use of Blackboard, and Blackboard would be down and not functioning. So I have to have a plan B, okay? I've had to, actually use handouts, write things on the board or whatever, because sometimes there's not a thing you can do about something that's gone wrong. Know what your key messages are out of your presentation. That's what you want to keep drawing your audience back to, is your key message. And of course, with the one that you've got coming up, your key message is going to be that, having a web page is going to be good for your company. So you want to keep coming back to that. You want to be where people can see you easily. Now, this is unfortunately one of the problems with a lecture room like we have here, is because I have a computer in front of me. Okay, and that makes it hard for everybody to see me sometimes. And of course, if you're in another location, you have to work with the technology as well. Don't just stand in one place. Move around, but don't distract the audience by, running circles around the room or anything like that. Your podiums and tables, use those strategically. You don't want to stand still behind a podium. Again, I go back to a pastor giving a sermon. I've had pastors that stood directly behind the podium the whole hour giving their sermon, and I have others that come out into the congregation and walk the aisles and things. So use them strategically. I can't tell you one way is right and one way is wrong. It depends on your audience. It really does. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, there's more than just what comes out of your mouth as part of your presentation. We have non-verbal things that communicate just as much information, and that's where this SOFTEN model comes in, the letters SOFTEN. They stand for smile, open stance, forward lean, tone, eye contact, and nod. Okay? If you look at them, they probably make a lot of sense when you think about them. Certainly smiling is going to be more receptive than somebody who's angry looking the whole time they're making a presentation. An open stance means that you are willing to accept others into your conversation. A forward lean means that you're engaging other people. Of course, the tone of voice can make a difference. And eye contact. I absolutely despise having a conversation with someone where they won't look you in the eye. It's like they're hiding something. So as a presenter, you want to be looking into the eye of other people so that you don't give that you don't convey that you're trying to hide anything either. And of course, nodding, just occasional nodding when you're, agreeing with something that your audience might be saying. That's reassuring, shows your warmth and your concern over your audience as well. All right, dress for success. Once again, this is a concept that we're not actually going to worry about too much for your presentation, but formal business dress is intended to project executive presence and seriousness. So you got something really serious you're presenting about, or where you need to show that you are an executive among your audience members, and you want to go with the formal business dress. So that's like business suits, dark, conservative, collared shirts, button-down dress shirts. If you are male, you need to have that necktie on. Okay. Business casual dress is a little bit more comfortable. It's still a high standard of professionalism, but it is a little bit more relaxed. Kind of varies a little from company to company as to what is considered to be business casual. Some people even divide it into high-level business casual and low-level business casual. I would say that business casual dress is probably completely acceptable for an internal type presentation like those that you would be making on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. And then we have completely casual dress, definitely less formal, really kind of rare in a business-related setting. A lot of companies have implemented dress down days, like maybe every Friday is a casual dress day. But I would not go as far as to say that means you should wear sweatpants to class, okay? Or not to class, to your job. Sorry about that. Executives still kind of feel that even on casual days, like casual Fridays, you still need to be able to project a professional image. But you don't necessarily have to have a necktie on or something of that sort, or high heel shoes. You still need to kind of adhere to what a professional image is. Now, I know there are some professions that don't require as much business dress as others do, okay? It's my understanding that people in the field of IT, information technology, a lot of those don't dress as professionally every day as people in, say, a retail sales setting, okay? Now, I worked part-time for Belk for a while, and we had a dress code. We had certain things we could and couldn't wear, and it was definitely professional dress because we were meeting with the public day to day, and we needed to be conveying a professional image with those people, okay? We couldn't wear tennis shoes, no matter how bad our feet hurt. And trust you me, sales jobs like that, your feet hurt a lot. You couldn't, you had to wear dress pants, of course, no jeans, no leggings, that kind of thing. So that's certainly a difference than perhaps a person in an IT job that might be having to get down on the floor to do some kind of equipment maintenance or upkeep or something like that. But I would certainly tell you, if you ever go for a face-to-face interview, which I'm hoping all of you will, you need to go with that formal business dress for interviews. People don't take it very kindly with the casual dress on interview situations. And I'm probably a little old school about some of these things. I'm finding it just appalling sometimes when I go to weddings and funerals now and people are wearing cut-off jeans and things with holes in them and stuff. I grew up in an era where weddings and funerals were some of the most dressed up things that you went to. Now, most churches these days have gone to casual, wear whatever you want to kind of thing. I'm still holding on to that one. If it makes a difference whether you come to church or not, then I'm going to say come on in whatever you're in. But personally, if I don't dress up for the Lord, I don't know who I'm going to dress up for. So that's just me, okay? And I'm not trying to persuade you. Everybody makes their own decisions on some of these things, but that's just where I stand. I can only tell you what to do in a business situation, not your churches and your funerals and your weddings, but that's where I stand. The formality of your workplace attire. This little chart shows characteristics that people most associate with various levels of formality. Formal business attire is seen as being authoritative, incompetent, even down to business casual, being productive and trustworthy. The more casual you get, you see that the workplaces seem to be creative and friendly. Okay, so formal business attire may appear to be a little more unfriendly than the casual does. You're just going to have to kind of follow what's being done in the company that you're working for, rather than setting your own standards, unless you just happen to be one of those folks that prefers to stand out. Now, some little things that you should kind of be aware of that'll make things go astray if you don't watch out. Avoid turning out the lights, okay? Sometimes when you're doing presentations, especially if you have slides, they may not show up very well with all your lights on, but when you turn out the lights, you're going to lose some people, okay? Don't start your slides right away. Give a little, get into it a little bit first. You don't want to just jump, right, here's the presentation. And, okay? Speak to your audience, not to the screen. And so when you're doing your presentations, you don't want to be looking over your shoulder at the slides themselves. You want to be looking at your audience when you're talking. And we've already touched on this next one. Do not read your slides. You're talking to people who can all read, okay? What you need to be is interpreting them. And here's one that I see so many people forgetting to do, and that is to preview the slides before you show them. You will catch things like misspelled words or something that's not being displayed exactly the way you thought it should be, and so on. So always look at your slides before you show them, okay? Just like you should always read your report before you submit it, okay? Read anything in a homework assignment before you submit it, because we all make typographical mistakes. We all use grammar that might have made sense when we were typing it out, but once we read it, it doesn't make sense, and so on. Go back and review. All right, if you have access to a remote control, you want to use that to advance your slides and avoid standing in front of the slide projection. You don't want your audience member to have to say, oh, can you move this way or can you move that way? Blank slides should be used strategically. A blank slide kind of makes it look like you forgot to put something up there. So, of course, you could use them if that's what you have a need for, but I would do that very rarely.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I see that you have a whiteboard here. Are we allowed to use that at all?
You're allowed to use the whiteboard, yes, absolutely.
Okay, I was just curious.
If you want to write something out, sometimes that's a good way to emphasize it. Okay? In the room that I'm in, however, the whiteboard is behind this actual projection thing, okay? So this room is set up a little differently than it is in Keysville. We actually have a projection screen that comes down rather than a smart board. So it's kind of hard to use the whiteboard and the projection screen at the same time. So you have to go with what you've got. That's one thing about when you're doing a presentation, you probably always ought to check out the room ahead of time, because you may have designed it to use certain type of technology or whatever, and get there and find out that they don't have what you needed. So always check out where you're going to make sure that they've got what you have necessary. Like, for one thing, I have up here on this desk, I have an Elmo projector, which I use Elmos a lot in my accounting class because it's easier to project accounting forms off of an Elmo rather than trying to draw it or something of that sort. However, the Elmo is not connected into this Zoom equipment. So if I were to write something on the Elmo, I could not show it to my other locations. And it took me, a couple of classrooms to figure out what I was going to do when I normally wanted to use the Elmo. Handouts can be very effective, especially if you have detail or numerical information. We suggest, however, that your handouts be passed out at the end of your presentation. That allows you control over the message. And if you've ever distributed handouts ahead of time, you find once that you put those handouts into the hands of your audience, that's what they're focusing on, is the handout, not on you. And you want the focus to come back to you. You can choose to ask questions during the presentation or accept questions from your audience. Those will help you interact with your audience as you go along. Now, I have been to presentations where some presenters say, please hold all questions till the end. But most people nowadays say, feel free to ask me questions along the way if you want to. So fielding questions during the presentation may be the more acceptable way. Mingling, that's just helping to getting to know your audience and finding out a little bit about them. And then, of course, don't forget you want to follow up with your audience members afterwards.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
I am so sorry to keep interrupting.
No.
And this
I'm fielding questions during my presentation.
So out of the loop. Now, next when we do our presentation, are you going to be the only one in the audience, or are we going to have more people?
It's just going to be me.
It's just
you can pretend that there are other people in the audience if you want to, but I don't want you to feel conscious about presenting to other teammates. And I don't want other classmates to get an opportunity to look at your presentation and then change theirs just because you did something.
Can we bring mannequins for, never mind, I was kidding. It was a bad joke.
Never on that one? Okay.
It was a bad joke.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you want to put a fake person in the chair, that's fine with me, but for 10 minutes, I think that's probably going overboard.
I think so too. Back.
All right. When you are fielding questions, when somebody asks you a question, sometimes it's better to pause a little before you answer. The old hold your tongue before you speak thing works well here too. Be honest. Show appreciation that other people are asking questions. Try to be concise in your answers. And if the question is a little off track from what your presentation is really about, try to reframe it to match up with what your goals are for the presentation. There's some examples there about being honest, some less effective and more effective responses that you can see here, as well as showing appreciation and being concise. As well as reframing the question. All right, so you guys can read through those if you are, as you're preparing for your presentation, if you feel like that might be something that you might need to address. Now I will tell you all, as far as your presentations in here for this class, I'm not gonna purposely try to lead somebody astray or act like a terrible audience member and ask some kind of horrible question or anything like that. So I'm not going to be a pain in the butt, in other words. I'm not trying to do this to get you off track or anything. Okay, team presentations where you've got more than one person that's involved in the presentation. You need to be clear that you're all on the same track about what your objectives are, what your key messages are. Decide on your presentation roles. And that means ahead of time, you need to get together and say, this team member is going to present such and such, the next team member is going to present such and such, and then so on. You want it to be a united front. You want everybody that's involved in the team to kind of be up front and together. And you want to refer to each other as you are presenting. Make your transition very effective from one person to another. Don't want to make it look like it's just, you know, the end of my presentation and the beginning of somebody else's presentation. I know when I go to a lot of conferences, I sit in on a lot of team presentations, and I see some that are excellent and you can tell that they've prepared ahead of time, and you see others where there are team members that you didn't even really know they were on the team until it was all over with and they said, oh, by the way, thanks so-and-so for helping with this. So there are definitely good and bad ones. Now, what about if you're the audience member? You're not the one who's presenting. If you're in the audience, you should take that role seriously. Don't distract the presenter. If you're making comments and asking questions, do things that are on message, okay? And most of the time you're actually in a presentation where the professional interests are common with the presenter, so realize that you are sort of part of the team of the whole presentation, even if you are in the audience. Okay, so you can think of your classrooms again as a stage for a presentation, and if you've ever seen your lecturer, your instructor get irritated, it's probably because the behaviors of the audience members have been distracting to the presenter. Like when someone is on their cell phone constantly while the presentation is trying to be made, that's very distracting, okay? When a student consistently asks, is that going to be on the test? Is that going to be on the test? You know, that's very distracting, and it keeps makes it hard for the lecturer or the instructor to stay on track. So realize being an audience member is just as important as being the actual presenter. All right, so there are your little summary takeaways for this chapter. We looked at credibility, we looked at being confident, we looked at the soften model, how we can incorporate slides and handouts, how to interact with your audience, and then we looked at team presentations and being an audience member. All right, so hopefully some of these will help you get ready for next week and build on some skills a little bit. We are going to take our break and come back and look at a video or two about effective presentations to give you some examples to look at rather than just looking at these slides. So take your 15-minute or so break. We'll put, let's say 3:15. We'll come back. No, 3:10. I've got 10 till or 5 till now. So about 3:10, we'll come back in here and we'll take a look at a couple videos, and I'll also address any questions you might have come across as you've been working on the presentations as well. So take your time to catch your breath and use the restroom and so on, and we shall be back in 15 minutes or so. Okay, I'm back so we can finish up. I've got the recording back on. And I've got a video or two to look at real quick. I guess I haven't been really good about reminding you all that the homework assignments are up there still too for each chapter, the multiple choice. So make sure you're getting those done, as well as this presentation going on. And I also want to make sure you know that Tuesday we do have one more chapter to do. So even if you want to present Tuesday, we'll get the class over with first, and then we'll allow for anybody who wants to go ahead and present on Tuesday. Let's see. Do I need to get my...
Yeah.
Okay, this is a little video to help you deal with stress and anxiety when you're doing your presentation. Something that I think just about everybody faces, especially when you're doing those and when you know you're going to be graded on it.
For 7 years, I presented the news on television. And every Thursday, I would go in front of my camera and I heard the director in my ears saying, "Attention studio for live, 5, 4, 3. And every Thursday, I felt my heart racing. Every week, 7 years. Now, I tell you this because there is this huge misunderstanding that experienced speakers, they are not nervous. When you see that speaker on stage and you say like, well, they do it in a natural way. No, they don't. They are nervous. But the difference for me between an experienced and an inexperienced speaker is that experienced people know how to handle the nerves. And I want to give you this insight because it really helped me a lot to deal with my nerves. Because it all begins with the brain. That's why my explanation begins, because you have to look at your brain as having these different antennas, and your brain really wants to protect yourself, and it takes that job very seriously. So as soon as the antennas perceive a kind of danger, a button is pushed. It's a button somewhere here, in your head, in your brain, and it's called the amygdala. It has the shape of an almond, the color of an almond. It is small as an almond, but it's a very important button because as soon as the button is pushed, that's what we call the fight or flight reaction. You have all these sensations in your body, typically the things that you experience when you are nervous, like a dry mouth, legs shaking, your heart really beating very fast, your respiration is going faster. And this is something that actually is there to protect yourself, because as it is a fight or flight reaction, imagine that there is this car nearly racing into you when you cross a road. The fact that you have this heartbeat that is fast, it actually prepares you to react and to run, actually. Now the thing is, when you stand in front of an audience, you cannot run. So the antennas, they don't make a difference between a real danger and a danger in your head. So what happens is when you're in front of your audience, you cannot run, you kind of freeze, but still you have these sensations, so you want to protect yourself. Now this is on a subconscious level. What happens on a conscious level is that actually, when you stand in front of your audience, you want to protect yourself. So actually by doing this, now this is overdoing it. But to some extent, that's what speakers actually do in front of an audience. Stand like that, you really want to protect yourself, looking down or looking very quickly from one person to another. Now, what does an experienced speaker do? Exactly the opposite. They, on a conscious level, they make themselves big in front of the audience. You could say that they fake it. Making yourself big, what I mean with that is having that posture in front of your audience that gives you a kind of a positive attitude. Now, to know what that is, just watch television. You can really learn a lot from it. And I advise you to look especially at people, for example, presenting the news, but people standing, because that's the most difficult thing to do, how to stand in front of that audience, what to do with your arms, what to do with your legs. Just look at how they stand and imitate that, because this is a good neutral position. Same thing for the way you look. A tip that I have there is that you actually look at your audience as though you pour them a glass of wine, because this will help you to stay with one person. You look at one individual at a time. The time it takes to pour them a glass of wine, to avoid that you would either look away or look very nervously from one person to another. So the next time you experience these nerves, what I advise you to do is stand and look in a conscious way. Just watch television to know what that can be, and watch TED.com, because on that website you have all these presentations with PowerPoint, without PowerPoint. Look at it with that volume, because it helps you to look how they stand. What I absolutely advise you to do is watch Amy Cuddy. She's an expert on body language, and this is exactly what she's talking about faking it. So just have a look, imitate, integrate, and make it your own.
Okay, so some good advice there. If you want to be effective, you can watch effective presentations. You can watch as simple as going and watching your local news, and you see somebody stand presenting. Usually it's a news reporter that's doing a separate story, not your news anchors, but your reporters. You can watch them. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, okay? Or you can go to TED.com, like she said. Wonderful tool to take a look at for presentations if you want to see how other people do it. But remember, it's a natural reaction to that fight or flight type reaction when your body senses that you have something that you fear. It wants to protect it. So just because you get anxious about your presentation, it is very, very natural for you. And what you want to do is to be able to handle those nerves that come along with it by taking some of those steps. I think I like the idea, if you want to focus on people in the audience, stay with each person for as long as you mentally pour them a glass of wine. Now, if anybody would like to bring a bottle of wine Tuesday or Thursday, I will bring a glass, and y'all can fill my glass up as many times as you want to, okay? But I probably would get in trouble with that, so I better pass.
Extra credit? Do we get extra credit?
I guess maybe not. I might lose my job, so.
Thanks for thinking about it, though.
I did thought about it a lot when, nothing better than a glass of wine, but, well, maybe a few things better. Anyway, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, but, if you're focusing in on me, you can mentally think about how long it takes to pour a glass of wine, and then you move on to the next person, and gives you a good little way to make yourself around an entire room there. So I found one of my very favorite TV shows in the world is The Big Bang Theory. I don't know if any of you love it. I mean, I could watch it 24/7 and be happy with it, but there's one episode where
Bazinga!
where Sheldon is, he does a presentation he does flags, an internet flag show, and Penny shows him, she's an actress, how he can be more inviting to the audience and so on. I pulled that one off of YouTube. We're going to take a look at it, and maybe you can see some things that we've talked about today. And
Fun with
it's funny, but it's got some good points. So let's take a look at that. let's see, I need to get over here, first of all. Hold on. There we go.
Yeah, she told me that you have to be accepting, you know, have to be open. So he spread his leg.
Hello,
I remember.
Dr. Sheldon Cooper. Welcome to Sheldon Cooper Presents Fun with Flags.
He's doing some things that y'all are not supposed to do.
Coming late. I did shoot one last week in honor of Black History Month, but I was informed by my roommate that my spot-on portrayal of George Washington Carver could be considered wildly racist. My heart goes out to the members of the African American community who, like me, have been kept down by the man. Now, Fun with Flags is not just for the flag aficionado, it's also for the flag novice. So to help me with that, please welcome my friend, neighbor, and flag virgin, yet not a real virgin. She's had quite as many times. Sometimes within earshot of this flag enthusiast. Most watchers I watch The Incredibles. Penny.
Hello.
So, Penny, I understand you would like to learn more about flags.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been at a party where everyone's talking about flags and I just couldn't join them.
Well, you came to the right place.
I'm sorry, can I just pause for a minute?
What's wrong?
I just think it might look more natural if you talk to me instead of the camera. You know, like a real conversation, something we work on in my acting class.
Interesting. A few people in the comments section have said that my delivery is robotic. Perhaps that isn't the compliment it sounds like.
Yeah, let's try it again. And maybe this time you could work on your body language a bit. You know, when you're all hunched like that, you're shutting the audience out, but when you're relaxed and open, you're inviting them in.
Right. And which one do I want?
Let's try open.
Our friend the flags taught me anything is to go where the wind takes you, as long as you remain firmly attached to a rigid pole. And action. So, Penny, what sort of flag questions keep you awake at night?
Well, I'm from Nebraska, so what can you tell me about the state flag?
Gosh, Penny. What do you have for breakfast? A big glass of good question juice? The Nebraska state flag is simply the state seal on a field of blue.
It's okay, it's funny.
Spread your legs and bite them in.
Well, I think you probably get the point there. He was extremely uptight and not. Oh, let me stop him again. Hold on. There we go. Very robotic was the word that was used, but clearly not engaging with the audience nor his neighbor there as well. He kind of went the other extreme though, didn't he? When she was teaching him some things, he went overboard, like punching her in the shoulder and spreading his legs wide open to try to invite them in. That was kind of funny. So somewhere in between those two is a good happy medium, which I'd like for you all to see in the using your presentations if you can. We don't want the robotic, him pointing his hand to the slides and all that kind of stuff. But then I don't want you to go overboard and come up and hug me or anything like that. So perhaps afterwards when we mingle, we can do the hugging and touching, but that's, as far as the presentation goes, I think that's about it. So What kind of questions do you all have?
I want to learn on like the makeup website.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, what are some things that I could say?
Well, okay, in case you couldn't hear her, she said that she wants to do hers pretending that she's doing it for a makeup company, a beauty type situation or whatever. What I would probably do would maybe just go on the web and Google, what's it called, that Sally's, is that what it is, Sally's Beauty Shop, and see if they've got a website, kind of see what kind of things they have. If they don't have one, I'm sure that there are plenty of other beauty places. You could just click beauty websites or something like that. But you could do some, just go on the computer and see if you can find out why makeup companies have decided to use the internet for sales. You might even contrast it with like Mary Kay, who theirs is primarily face-to-face home sales, or even like in Belk where they have counters that are dedicated to different makeup companies, and see if they're moving towards using the internet for their sales. Or, you could just drum up some statistics somewhere about the makeup industry and how much it's grown over the past few decades or something like that. That's what I would think. But I would, remember what you're trying to do is you're trying to show how a web page could actually be profitable to the company. So you would want to say, if you had a web page, you would access customers that you couldn't get face-to-face like Mary Kay does, or have to have a retail outlet like Belk to go to. That costs a lot of money for a building and for those to pay those people who work in those counters for website and so on. So you might be able to offer your products less expensive to the customer, but they can order online. And
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Well, offering a company the benefits of having a web page is more just advertising. When they cross over into e-commerce, being able to ship products seems like a different step. Do you know what I'm saying?
You kind of break it up when you were talking. I didn't quite.
Having a web page, just for them to have a web page, is advertising their product, which gives them more eyeballs.
That's right. Absolutely. More exposure to more customers.
Right. But
so, you could do some.
Is an entirely different business.
I would just simply say go to Google and Google why should a company have a web page, or what are the benefits of a web page? Just something like that, just to get some ideas about what you would want to show. But remember, I don't want everything that's on Google or Yahoo. I want you to condense it down to the main points, because you're trying to sell it to this Ms. Blair. You want some strong points. You don't want to just say a web page increases customers. You want to say, give me a statistic that you found somewhere. On average, you get exposure to so many more customers. You can give me a percentage or a number, or something that you found in your research. So I just Google why should a company have a web page and see what you come up with.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have to have it in the same format as that in the book?
The report itself does need to be in the same format as what we see in the book, because that's one of the things that we talked about was the heading, the executive summary, and so on. We want them to go in a certain order. So that was page 407 and 408, I believe,
Yeah.
The only other thing that those 2 pages did not have was your references, and I do want to see references for any research that you have.
Miss Henderson,
Mm-hmm.
we know, like my old business that I used to work for, like they created a website. So, can I do it kind of based off of that, like how it helped them with their profits and their business?
Absolutely. That would be wonderful. Whenever you've got a real life situation and you can piggyback off of that, that's a wonderful way to do it. Other concerns? Okay, well, I'm sure that some of you might actually get to working on the website, today and tomorrow and over the weekend. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. On the weekends, I don't necessarily get back to you right away, but I will get back to you if you need to catch me. Also, let me remind you, as far as the homework that you all do through Connect has said they are going to be down Saturday. So please keep that in mind as you're working. You will not have access to Connect on Saturday. I don't know whether, they didn't say what time, but they said pretty much the entire day. So, yeah, they're re-engineering or something is the word that they use. So, I know how Saturday might be a popular day for trying to get some of that stuff done, and that's going to put a kinker in it if you can't. It's not actually due till Sunday at midnight, so you still have Sunday to do it, but I know weekends get busy, especially in the summertime. Other questions? All right, I will put this recording up in case you need to look back over it again, and I will see you all Tuesday. Bye.